Today we are going to talk about the negotiating tactic called anchoring. And if anchoring is not the most important negotiating tactic to know, it is one of the most fundamental, and it is a tactic that myself and many other negotiators use all the time. Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to Joe the Lawyer. I'm your host, Joe Pometto, a practicing attorney out of Pittsburgh, PA. I do criminal defense and personal injury. If you like my content, please like, subscribe, comment, and share. Also, consider signing up for my email list. If you sign up for the email list, you will get a free PDF on what to do when pulled over by the police. Now, before we jump into this fascinating, interesting, and useful topic of anchoring, please raise your cup, your glass in the air. I mean, some of you come here for the content, but a lot of you just come here to share a sip of coffee with me. So raise your cup, your glass in the air. This is my fancy Key West cup that I just got when visiting Key West with my mother over the summer. Cheers with me. It tastes better when we sip together. Cheers. Delicious. So first, let's talk a little bit about attorneys and negotiations. So many of you might have heard the saying, everything is a negotiation. Well, that may be true. That may or may not be true in daily life. However, in the life and job of an attorney, it is always true. It's true that everything is a negotiation. But let's look back from the practice of law first. Warfare, conflict, is a negotiation, right? As two sides are fighting and battling, negotiations are ongoing. Usually war is the result of a breakdown in negotiations, and some would say that warfare is an extension of negotiations. So trade deals, buying a car, buying new insurance, those are a couple of things that you can apply negotiation skills and tactics to everyday life. So it's very useful to know this. However, what I want to talk about is the life of an attorney, right? Everything lawyers do is essentially a negotiation. You may watch television, you see attorneys arguing in court, you see attorneys arguing to the judge, okay? When you have an actual trial, that's when the lawyers go to war, right? You have two sides that are trying to win. They're trying to persuade the judge or jury. That means negotiations have broke down. What you often don't see in television is all the negotiations that happen beforehand. Most of you are aware that most cases settle, right? And that's all a result of negotiations. So lawyers are very, very schooled in negotiations. If they're not, that's a skill that you're going to have to grasp very, very quickly. Okay, so what is anchoring? Anchoring, this is something I do in almost every single negotiation, and it is extremely powerful. Now, the word anchoring, my understanding, has come about in the last 5 to 10 years when certain studies and examinations of psychology looked into anchoring, okay? And what you would have called anchoring before the studies and this term was put to it was leading with your highest offer, leading with a high or even an extremely high offer, okay? And let me give you a definition of anchoring real quick. It is that the first number presented in a negotiation becomes a reference point for the rest of the negotiation. The first number presented becomes a reference point. So let me give you a quick example. Let's say, for instance, you are trying to buy a car, and the car may be listed online at $15,000. Now, as the consumer, you want to pay less than $15,000. So what do? You go in, you start the negotiations with a number lower than $15,000. So you may say $5,000. You call the dealer up or you go and visit the dealer. And I know this isn't done as much today as it was done in the past, because oftentimes dealers, they put prices up. Buying a car now is like buying something at Walmart, right? The sticker price is the final price. We don't have negotiations like we used to, but you still can barter and negotiate with certain cars, okay, and certain car dealers. Anyway, Car's listed at 15,000, you go in at 5,000, right? And so you're communicating to the dealer, I will buy this car for $5,000. Now that low price becomes the anchor, it becomes the reference point. So he listed at 15, you said 5. He may come back and say, whoa, 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 this car is worth much more than $5,000. However, because you started low, he's going to have to go lower than the 15, right? He's going to have to come back and say, well, I'll give it to you for $12,500. And then you say $7,500. And then he says $10,000, meet me in the middle, boom, you took $5,000 off the price. So that is the concept of anchoring, starting low, starting high, and creating a psychological reference point for the rest of the negotiation. Now, this tactic can also be used in non-monetary negotiations. It's most popular because that's usually what we're negotiating over is money and a number, but it can be used in non-monetary. Let me give you an example in politics, and I'm going to use former President Donald Trump for this. You may hate Donald Trump. You may love Donald Trump. One thing about Donald Trump is he knew certain negotiation tactics, and this is just a good example that everybody can understand. I'm not expressing an opinion on him one way or another, okay? But when Donald Trump was running for president, and then when he became president, he said, I want to build a wall. He wanted to build a wall between the United States and Mexico, okay? That could be seen as an anchor point or a high offer, a large ask to start the negotiation. Now, did Donald Trump end up getting the wall? No, we all know that he didn't. But if you look, you read about what actually happened is he did get greater security on the border and portions of the wall were built. So that's just an example of using anchoring in a non-monetary negotiation. It can be applied to monetary negotiations. It can also be applied to non-monetary negotiations. Now, I have a couple of keys to using this tactic effectively. And some of you may say, well, with that wall example, perhaps Donald Trump violated some of these rules, or perhaps he didn't. Perhaps he stayed within the bounds of it. But the first thing to say is when you make this offer, don't go ridiculously high or go ridiculously low. So I used the example of $5,000 on a $15,000 car as a good opening offer. Well, maybe that would be perceived as a little bit too low. You might want to start your anchoring at $7,500 or $10,000 on the $15,000 car if all you want to do is get $1,000 or $2,000 off. So your anchoring needs to be set to your final goal. But you cannot go ridiculously low or ridiculously high, right? On a $15,000 car, if you try to anchor with a $100 offer, you are just going to spoil the pot for the entire deal because the seller is no longer going to think that you're credible or that you're realistic and may just walk away or completely ignore you. And the same thing can be said, like, for instance, let me give you an example in the practice of law. Someone may be in a car accident and suffer, a neck injury and a head injury. It's fairly minor, but they had to treat for it for a couple of weeks, and then all their symptoms cleared up. Now, in that situation, do you think that person would deserve $100,000? Would that person deserve even $50,000? Well, that injury, I think most people would agree, something minor like that may be worth $7,500. So as an attorney represents that person dealing with the insurance company, if you start with a $100,000 offer, you're going to damage your credibility and spoil the negotiations. So that is the fear of going too high. So you still need to be within the realm of what is realistic. However, you should still do something fairly, at least in my own personal preference when negotiating, is you want to push the envelope a little bit. So number one is Don't go too high, too low, or make a ridiculous opening offer. Your anchor will not be effective and it will spoil the pot. And number two is when you shoot your anchor, when you throw your anchor, right? Because essentially that's what you're doing is like you're throwing the anchor on your boat into the ocean and hoping it catches, all right? When you toss your anchor, do it with your final goal in mind. So in my first example, $15,000 car, if you wanted to buy it for 10, you may want to start that anchor off with 5. And listen, maybe you're willing to walk away from the deal. So you throw the anchor at 5, and if you don't get the deal at 10, you walk away. All right, but that $5,000 anchor is probably good enough to get that person down to 10, or at least take your best shot. Because if you anchored with 8,000 in your first offer, you're likely not going to get them from 15 all the way down to 10. So do it with your final goal in mind. In the personal injury example, you're trying to settle the case. You think the concussion is worth $10,000. Okay, you may want to start out I might start out by making a $30,000 offer, and then working them up to $10,000 from there. And that $30,000 reference point, here's why another reason it's useful is if they settle the case for $10,000, they're going to go back and they're going to say, this lawyer wanted 30 and now he's willing to settle for 10. We saved you $20,000. They saved their client $20,000. So that is another reason that anchoring is so important, because it creates the reference point, and if it's done correctly in a way that is realistic, you don't go too far, too high, or too low, and you do it with your end goal in mind, in my opinion, is the most important negotiating tactic. And it's also a reason why you may want to make the first offer. There's other reasons to make the first offer in a negotiation that perhaps I will cover in a later video, but today I wanted to cover anchoring. So anchoring is the concept that the first number or the first offer you saw with the example of the wall presented in a negotiation becomes a reference point for the rest of the negotiations. You being the person to do that, to throw the anchor, it can give you control of the negotiation going forward. The key to using this tactic, don't go too high, don't go too low, don't go too extreme, and do it with your goals in mind. Like I said, there's some research, perhaps I'll post it in the description below, that shows that anchoring works. Anchoring is effective, and it plays on people's psychology in a way that can be conducive to negotiating a final deal. And if you know how to use it, you can use it to your benefit. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I'm Joe Pometto, Joe the Lawyer. If you like my content, please like, subscribe, comment, and share. Here on this channel, I will present legal tactics, give legal advice, put things out there things that lawyers know that other people can use in everyday life. Go ahead and sign up for my email list. You'll get a free PDF on what to do when stopped by the police. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and have a tremendous and happy Christmas. Thank you. Bye-bye.